everybody? Welcome to today's show. My name is Spencer Welsh. Thank you so much for joining us here today. We have a good one for you as always. Here's what is on the show. We have one more day until Twitter probably is going to become unusable. Cable news will be full of tributes, remembrances, serious solemn coverage of the day, January 6th, 1 year anniversary tomorrow. And today there's a very interesting piece about in the Times about a kind of under-discussed question, how Trump kind of kept his grip after January 6th on the Republican Party. He still very much is an important factor and definitely the lead candidate for the nomination today, sounding like his old self again, I think, in a lot of key ways. But the question is, even if he's not even back on Twitter, will he be able to survive? Also, Andrew Cuomo will not be prosecuted in a groping case. It is not the most surprising thing, but still an incredibly aggravating thing to see that slip away. And an update from Brazil. Brazil's Lula now is leading the judge who locked him up in a big three-way race for the presidency. It can be very, very interesting to watch there. And we are going to get right into it right now. And we start, of course, at the top with, how Trump kept control of the party after January 6th. And I think probably one of the biggest things here is that when we really see January 6th, I talked about it with Jacob on the last show. Pretty much my biggest questions are, I think some of the points that he raised, that Jacob did about January 6th and, the people in charge and actually dealing with those people in ways that will prevent them from running for office. I think Trump, whatever he did, that is definitely something that is going to very much come back to bite if it's not dealt with properly. I think that's a very, very fair thing to say because he instigated this for sure. But I think also the ball was dropped on more than just his end in terms of how was this allowed to happen. And, all of what we know about the FBI's infiltration and the federal infiltration into these groups and how publicly it was planned and how much, how little security was there and how poorly armed and, equipped to resist the security was, I think is very, very, very telling how that whole thing turned out. So this is going to be very, very interesting. So this is from the Capitol newsletter. So this is about Jeremy Peters writing. 6 weeks after the January 6th assault on the Capitol, Donald Trump's pollster Tony Fabrizio. That's a very if you kind of expected Trump's pollster. If you want to pick a name for his pollster, that's probably a name I would pick. Tony Fabrizio there. He conducted a survey of Republicans that looked at how well the former president was among several distinct groups of voters within the party. So it was the first time Fabrizio had done a detailed breakdown of the GOP electorate since 2007 when he identified an emerging segment he called the Dennis Miller Republican. So again, the Dennis Miller Republican is probably a very, very outdated cultural term to give the fact that, Dennis Miller was kind of around in the era of Bill O'Reilly and, Fox News was the only major conservative media force. In the age of Trump, I'd say that has really fractured in a big way. Dennis Miller is pretty much irrelevant. But there are definitely people, this modeled after this guy, and really, Trump kind of took this mantle, people who pride themselves on being brash and politically incorrect and actively, respect other people who are like that and are able to piss off the people that they hate. The growing sense of cultural isolation and anger among these Americans, conservatives, independents, and former Democrats, shaped the contours of what would be the Trump movement. So a veteran GOP pollster who has worked on the presidential campaigns going back to Pat Buchanan's first White House bid in 1992, Fabrizio saw how thoroughly Trump had remade the GOP in his image and how enduring his popularity remained even after the attack in the seat of American democracy. So the people who describe themselves as the most committed Republicans were also the most likely to say they were committed to Trump. Fabrizio found in the post-Jan 6 survey, feelings about the former president, he explained in his analysis, were so intertwined with understanding many voters had about what it meant to be a strong Republican that Trumpism and party fidelity have become kind of one and the same. Because I think Trump, in a lot of ways, in terms of because look at the fundamental point, someone like Ronald Reagan served as a cultural icon, especially within conservatism, was coming at a time where, the fundamental economic structure of America, the changing of the oil prices, inflation, all that stuff was fundamentally changing. And there are two ways, we could do it. We could kind of do that Joe Biden style, Jimmy Carter style approach, which is kind of just let it happen, seek meaning elsewhere, and without any kind of real appropriate backing for it, which is always kind of proved to be pretty unpopular. Jimmy Carter saying that thing, we gotta live within our means as Americans, that kind of thing. Almost in the spiritual manner. I mean, almost it is spiritual, I think. What Reagan and Trump are kind of offering, or kind of did offer in their own ways, which just was like spiritual in that America, the idea of America is really what they're selling, at its finest. It evolves, it changes, and then Trump has, I think, completely refined it in his way, just saying, you know what, go out, guns a-blazing, just say all the things against the people that, wronged you, and that is, a very, very appealing thing at a time when neither political party can offer anything, more structural or material. Trump, we talk about the position he is now, but in the immediate aftermath of January 6th, Trump's enduring appeal was not so apparent. A Pew Research poll had taken a few days after the attack showed his approval rating was reaching the lowest point of the presidency, 29%. Senior Republicans who spent the previous 4 years carefully avoiding direct conflict with Trump now felt a need to denounce him. Kevin McCarthy urged his colleagues to support a resolution to censure Trump for inciting the violence. And in a speech on January 3rd, the day after Trump was impeached for the second time, McCarthy was unambiguous about where he believed the blame fell. The president bears responsibility for Wednesday's attack on the Capitol by mob rioters, he said, pretty much going against this real effort on the Republican side to just almost throw whatever at the wall. And really a fundamental, the thing that, you can almost respect the rioters if they came out and owned it a little bit even more. But really what they're doing, and the story of this situation for the past, however many months, with all these people getting rounded up slowly but surely by Merrick Garland, is just them coming out and saying, we didn't mean it. It was Democrats. It was Antifa. It was something else like that. Like, you signed up for this. You are part of this. Like, you made this big move. And now you're going to come out and say, right before you go down, oh, it was the Democrats. So, with the FBI, the FBI relationship, I think, is something that should be investigated. But, all these people at least own it a little bit there. Even former Vice President Mike Pence, who was hustled out of the Senate chamber, was angry enough to privately fume to a Republican senator after all the things I've done for him. After all the things I've done for you. I could see Mike Pence going crazy to Donald Trump and just Trump be like, sorry, Mike, you're a loser. Sorry. Bye-bye. Speaking of Mike Pence, he was, everyone was kind of plotting, what does Mike Pence have planned? He's secretly trying to push past Trump, but no, he has no swag, and swag is the only thing you need in the Republican Party, personality style like Trump. Trump was Pence probably thought, he could use his Trump political, benefit to, push himself forward. But no, Trump made sure it was all about Trump and only Trump could benefit because nobody else has that kind of personality, especially not boring ass, mayo bread Mike Pence. And that is going to be, he does not have the ability to piss people off in the same way that Donald Trump does. Not even close. There are a few other Republican, the only one who's kind of in his own tier, which is nowhere close to Trump's even, but a little bit better than other people, is Ron DeSantis. That is just the reality of the modern day GOP. So the breach in support did not last long. After bearing the memory of what happened on January 6th, which Pence recently downplayed as one day in January, which is so sad. The fact that he was kind of the target of this, and Trump, Trump pretty much sent a mob after him, and now he's just, it was one day in January. This is why he will never amount to anything, because he has no backbone, and people see it. Mike Pence, especially the conservative voter base, they can smell that blood, and they know when you are as weak as we can be. And Mike Pence, sure, he has come back a chastened man, to be sure. 1 year after that day in January, polls show that most Republicans see little need to re-examine or even acknowledge what happened. Around 3/4 of them still view Trump favorably, or roughly the same when Fabrizio conducted the poll shortly after the 6th. And there is no sure sign the Republican Party remains the party of Trump. The fact that there remains no obvious or able challenger to take him on in sight. So McCarthy was among the first to change tack, visiting Trump's Palm Beach estate in January. After the two men posted a photo, the Trump spokesperson released a statement announcing the two men agreed to work together to reclaim the House majority. President Trump's popularity has never been stronger than it is today, and his endorsement means more than perhaps any endorsement at any time, ever. A statement noted McCarthy, eagerly signing on with that. So McCarthy has since tried to derail the Congressional Commission investigating the attacks all throughout. No one really seems more intent on proving how damaging it is politically for a Republican to question Trump's revisionist accounts of what happened in the 2020 election and on January 6th than Trump himself. So in an interview at Mar-a-Lago a few weeks after the attack, he suggested that Pence had jeopardized his political future by not heeding the demand to interfere with the counting of the Electoral College votes in Congress that day. And he certainly had, but he literally had no point. Like, there is no way what would have happened if he had come in there and done that. Like, there just there was and is no, like, kind of legal authority for that. And, the response, I think, from people who, not any kind of democratic force, but forces that just do not want to and cannot really see the status quo interrupted in this kind of a significant way would have made, I think, been quite interesting to see. So Trump did expressed little interest in discussing what harm might have been befallen Pence, his beseechingly loyal lieutenant of 4 years, as rioters marauded through the halls of Congress calling for an execution. Their threats weren't real, he insisted. I think it was an expression. I don't think they would have had ever thought of doing it. And, again, anyone who like kind of tries to tell you these rioters are, big and scary and threatening, I think that is a bit of an, understatement. But, who knows what they would have done. I think it is, very hard to say that they would have, if they actually gotten their hands on Pence, which, I think was very unlikely from the start. But I think, who knows what they actually would have done. But I think that the likelihood of it is very, very is very, very low, pretty much. So at first, Republicans tried to dispel the idea that Trump's dominance over the party would continue once he left office. Many of them sounded like Senator Rick Scott of Florida, who said in a television interview the GOP belongs to no single person but to its voters, the people. Trump, however, though, did offer a revealing clarification to Scott's comment, saying, quote, "The people like me the best by far," So he's right. That's that Trump truth coming back, and he knows it, and so does Rick Scott. That is just the reality of the situation there. So yeah, that is how, that's kind of a little bit of a window and how Trump kind of kept this party in a line. And, really, I think the biggest buy-in was the media behind him. And the question is, where does that happen now? Like, where do we go from here? I think it's going to be very interesting to see what happens with Trump's kind of takes on vaccines. If he comes out, if he starts to try and take a more public role, putting his name in the ring post-2022, vaccines become a little bit less of an issue, so we kind of move past that. I think Biden is in a very, very weak position, especially if the midterms go bad, and Trump is in the form where I think he could pull that challenge off and make it very, very serious. Especially, it would be interesting to see what happens if Biden faces some multi-sided pressure, some action from Trump, maybe some action from a primary challenge on the Biden side, or possibly even an open nomination. So things, there is, it seems very kind of stale, and kind of in the post-COVID world, 2020, post the primaries, like the possibilities of change and real kind of world-shifting action seem very, very small. But we are entering up on a very interesting situation. It's going to be interesting to see what happens as we kind of come out of this COVID space and what happens in the future. Even though COVID is a big shock to the system, may not have been the kind of going in the right direction that so many people would have wanted. All right. We're going to go now a little bit more local here in New York, where former Governor Andrew Cuomo of New York will not be prosecuted in a criminal case involving allegations he grew up to former aide at the executive mansion in 2020, the Albany County District Attorney announced on Tuesday. The announcement came on the heels of recent decisions by district attorneys in Nassau and Westchester counties. So, by the way, as a Westchester County resident in part, I would say that, the person who is the DA there, very, very interesting person. Deep ties to the New York Democratic Party kind of machine. MSNBC person for a long time. Big defender of Hillary Clinton. Obviously has close ties to Andrew Cuomo. A very, very interesting situation there. Famously known for going on MSNBC, this lady, and saying that, Bernie Sanders thinks about skin crawl. Long-time defender of all things Democratic establishment, especially New York Democratic establishment. So that alone, I don't know about the Nassau and Albany people, but it is very, very interesting to see all of that. So it brought on pretty much a blistering report here from the state attorney general, it brought an end to the only criminal charge thus far related to a blistering report from a state attorney general that led to his resignation in August. While the Albany district attorney said he was deeply troubled by the allegations against Cuomo made by former aide Brittany Camiso, the statement underscored the difficulties of building a criminal case out of them, saying, "Well, many have an opinion regarding the allegation against the former governor. The Albany County DA's office is the only one who has a burden to prove the elements of a crime beyond a reasonable doubt," said David Soares, the Albany County District Attorney, in a statement. "While we found the complainant in the case cooperative and credible, after review of all the available evidence, we have concluded that we cannot meet our burden at trial." Would have been a little bit interesting to find a bit more on that evidence, and get to understand it a little bit more. Facing and understanding some of the pressures and some of the things that may be at play here. I'd be interested to see what reporting may come out on that. But the move to drop the case in Albany came just days after Cuomo was set to be arraigned in court on Friday. So very, very convenient there, timing-wise, schedule-wise. Got a nice free weekend, single man, Mr. Cuomo there. The Albany County Sheriff's Office has filed a criminal complaint in October charging Cuomo with forcible touching, a misdemeanor sex crime that carries a penalty for up to 1 year in jail. But it remained unclear if Soares would pursue the case. Prosecutors in Manhattan and Oswego County are also known to be investigating other allegations from the report, but most seriously, the kind of a threat appeared to stem from Albany, where the officials accused him of forcible touching. The Manhattan District Attorney also closed without bringing. This is really interesting. The Manhattan District Attorney also closed without bringing charges in investigation into Cuomo's handling of nursing home deaths toward the start of the pandemic. I think this probably, with the forcible touching stuff, I think that is very, very bad, and should be prosecuted to the fullest extent of the law. But in terms of the real crime here committed, I mean, not to, I don't want to say the real crime, actually, because it seems like, this is really what people should be focusing on. But in terms of attention, I think it's so telling how the nursing home part has received no attention, where, the Me Too stuff, it's received a lot of attention, justifiably so. But, this stuff here, this nursing home information is being completely ignored. The huge campaign connection between, these nursing home decisions made by Cuomo, legal immunity for these people who accepted, these COVID patients back into the homes, causing massive amounts of death. And then, of course, we get, the full immunity granted from Cuomo there, right in time for the campaign check that he got when he was running for re-election from the Greater New York Nursing Home Association back in 2018. And the high hid death data from the feds, lying about it, all that kind of stuff, the cover-up as well, also going throughout this entire time that Cuomo was trying to write this book and everything and be famous. Melissa DeRosa admitting that they were hiding information there from the feds, and right as she just kind of parachuted out there. But it really seems like, this is either Cyrus Vance's, I saw this tweet, Alvin Bragg's first screw-up or Cyrus Vance's last cover-up. It remains to be seen, but that is really kind of a tough situation to take because of the real tough and awful thing that Cuomo did with this nursing home decision. So Soares' decision was first reported by the Times of Albany. It was the last chapter in the explosive case that was defined not just by the high-profile nature, but a string of missteps in the way it was handled, setting off tensions between the Albany sheriff and district attorney, and leading to accusations from the Cuomo camp. The case was politically motivated. It'd be interesting to see if anything similar possibly happened in Manhattan with that nursing home case. So the complaint stemmed from allegations made by Camiso, a former executive assistant to Cuomo, who said he groped her breast while they were alone at his private residence near the end of 2020. "What he did to me was a crime," Ms. Camiso told CBS This Morning in the Times Union in a joint interview last August. "It was not welcome. It was certainly not consensual." And, it's going to be interesting to see what happens to him here in the future. So Cuomo, he's served as governor, obviously, for more than a decade, repeatedly denied Camiso's, and probably would like to serve for a decade longer if he had the chance. He's just a incredibly power-hungry person who loves being in the spotlight, loves media attention, and, tried to, use it almost to get, certain things to happen for him. It certainly seems like. So the complaints here, the criminal complaints on the Cuomo side have just been incredibly aggressive. So in a news conference streamed online, the governor's personal lawyer, Rita Glavin, suggested the woman who had not been named, I think this is Camisa they're talking about because this was back in August, was not alone with Cuomo at the executive mansion on the day, and was sent there for different reasons than she had said, and expressed no qualms about the day in emails to colleagues. So Glavin's focused on the unnamed executive assistant, how the danger the assistant's account poses for Cuomo, and the possibility that it could lead to criminal charges. Now we know that that is not the case anymore here. The collapse of these various investigations all at once here into Cuomo, even through multiple entities that investigated him, from state of assembly to local prosecutors, said they found his accusers to be believable, underscores the difficulty of pursuing cases in sexual misconduct in criminal court, and especially in the state that has, we've seen Cuomo's deep relationships in so many different parts of the state. So, the acting district attorney of Nassau County described a state trooper's allegations Cuomo had run his hand across her stomach to be credible, deeply troubling, but not criminal under New York law. So again, I think the judgment here, the threshold admittedly is very, very high to get this kind of criminal charge there. Prosecutors in Westchester looked at instances in which two women, including the trooper, and said Cuomo had given them unwanted kisses on the cheek. And prosecutors in Albany would have had to clear a relatively high bar had they proceeded with the criminal charge, which required them to not only prove that Cuomo had touched Camiso, but he had done so with an intention of satisfying his own sexual desire or of degrading her. So getting that in there would have been very hard as well. Because cases like these rarely have irrefutable evidence, much of the burden would have fallen on Camiso's testimony. Roughly 1,400 cases like Cuomo's brought in a typical year. Almost 4 in 10 are dismissed or dropped. State criminal statistics show that is in part to because the standard using criminal court, which is obviously proving that beyond a reasonable doubt that crime has taken place, is the highest in the legal system, according to Deborah Turkheimer, a former Manhattan prosecutor and law professor at Northwestern, who has written about these sexual assault cases. So the women who have accused Cuomo could still file lawsuits in civil court, where the threshold for liability, paying damages and things like that, is going to be a lot lower. Legal hurdles aside, though, the case against Cuomo in Albany was interestingly enough, that it was riddled, with this big amount of controversy here from the start. It all began when Camiso filed the complaint with Sheriff Craig D. Apple in Albany County shortly after Tish James's report on August 3rd. The report concluded that Cuomo had sexually harassed multiple women, including Camiso, and that Sheriff Apple's office investigated Camiso's account, and nearly 3 months later, on October 28th, filed criminal charges against Cuomo on Albany City Courts, describing the case against him as, quote, very solid. This was one they just dropped. He did so, however, without consulting Camiso or coordinating with Suarez's office, which would be tasked in prosecuting the case. The decision by Sheriff Apple was as unusual as it was unexpected, especially in a high-stakes case involving a former governor, and it was seen as a tactic to make headlines or pressure Suarez, who was caught off guard, into pursuing the case. Suarez, however, did not commit to doing so. In early November, he wrote a letter to the judge overseeing the case that it was potentially defective, and he would need more time to finish his own investigation into Cuomo. So they pushed the case back, and as the court date loomed, Cuomo's team kind of picked away here publicly the integrity of the case, suggesting that politics may have played a role, and noting that Sheriff Apple had filed the complaint in the same week that James, whom Cuomo had blamed for his demise, declared her candidacy for governor. James, who dropped out of the race last month at the timing of the announcements, was purely coincidental, so they're going to kind of throw everything at him here. It is definitely a long and kind of complex situation that we will continue to follow for you here on Newsflash. Ladies and gentlemen, listeners of the Spencer Walsh Radio Network, happy holidays, and thank you so much for supporting us this year. We are willing to give the gift of audio to you this holiday season, and boy, will it keep coming. We have an action-packed schedule through the 17th of December to the 16th of January, and that all starts with new episodes of Newsflash now 3 times a week on our old summer schedule of Mondays, Wednesdays, and Fridays. In addition, Hidden History returns with 6 select episodes, 4 on Tuesdays and 2 on select Thursdays, to give you the perfect historical narrative to keep you interested through those times with the family this holiday season. It's been such a great year, and it couldn't have been as good for the Spencer Walsh Radio Network without your support. So, to another year of great audio. Thank you so much for listening to this live episode here of Newsflash. And we're now going to move on our last story today about the Brazilian election. Very, very interesting here. And The Intercept has done great reporting, breaking the story open from the beginning. And starts with a quote from Sergio Moro saying, quote, "This is not my version of the truth. This is the truth. An alternative truth does not exist," said Moro defensively before a mostly empty auditorium during the launch of his new autobiography last month. For a retired federal judge, the paltry turnout would have been unthinkable just a few years ago. Because remember, we did actually an episode about this a few years ago when it was a big story going through kind of the Intercept reporting about this story, Operation Lava Jato. Then, so just, when we did this a few years ago, Moro was riding high as arguably the country's most influential political actor, adored by the media, and millions viewed him as Brazil's leading crusader in the battle against corruption. The right worshiped Moro for his role as the judge who put Luiz Inácio Lula da Silva behind bars on corruption. The former president, leftist president, the popularity propelled Moro to high office as justice minister under far-right Jair Bolsonaro, who won the 2018 election after the former frontrunner Lula was made ineligible by Moro's conviction. For all three men, the tables have now dramatically turned. The Supreme Court freed Lula and vacated Moro's rulings, determining the judge was acted with bias after The Intercept revealed compromising secret chat logs showing illicit collusions between Moro and the prosecutors. Again, this is something that, for all the people who kind of go after Glenn Greenwald, this is when he was still at The Intercept, he played a big role in this. Something I really have internal respect for him and The Intercept for doing, especially Intercept Brazil, who faced incredible personal risk from Bolsonaro in this kind of police state run by his kind of two bubbling sons, that have actually, have ties to gangs, and their friends have been killed in the past, things like that. Very, very scary situation. They come out, they posters reporting that single-handedly changes, the fortunes of an entire presidency. It is very, very cool, and especially a presidency like Jair Bolsonaro's there. Pretty much the text showed that there was secret chat logs showing illicit collusion between Moro and the prosecutors' attempts to revive the cases against Lula have subsequently been thrown out, leaving Moro's legacy damaged. Another hit to Moro's credibility, which was decimated during his brief, controversial, and at times humiliating tenure in Bolsonaro's government, culminating in an anticlimactic, acrimonious departure in 2020. So pretty much, Moro got caught tilting, putting his thumb on the scale to try and take out Lula there. A very, very awkward situation, and the resignation, the best part is there, did not even go well. So following a high-paying consulting gig in Washington and even work on behalf of an Israel billionaire accused of corruption and rights abuses, Moro is now running for president himself, facing off against both his far more charismatic arch-nemesis, though, the former judge. His former charismatic arch-nemesis and his former boss, Jair Bolsonaro, who he accused of meddling in investigations that he was trying to do and resigned to kind of save face. He is really struggling to, break into double digits in polling, prior to have been pretty much kind of like a Jim Comey times Robert Mueller figure, in their heydays. He was that kind of guy. He was a big, big deal in terms of a fighter against corruption. Resurgent Lula, on the other hand, has ascended, polling at nearly 50%, with his lowest negative numbers of any major candidate. For his part, Bolsonaro, battled by an ailing economy and, also an ailing body. If you take into account his health at all, it is just not good in any stretch. And his administration's disastrous handling of the COVID-19 pandemic is only managing to attract about 20% of voters at this time. During his book tour, the unofficial launch of the presidential campaign, Moro conspicuously dodged inconvenient questions about mounting scandals that undercut his carefully crafted image. Interviews tend to only be granted to friendly outlets, and at the book launch, Moro refused to take questions from the press and pre-signed books to avoid a fan meet and greet where questions could have been sprung on him. The autobiography Against the System of Corruption lays out the official narrative of his professional life, but brazenly elides the secret chat logs first published by The Intercept in June 2019. Morrow has refused to acknowledge the archive's authenticity, though he's claimed no wrongdoing was exposed in the chats. Clearly not. The case was the rulings he made were completely, invalidated by Brazil's Supreme Court. In this book, Morrow, though, he presents himself as an earnest political outsider who's deceived by a president that proved to be unscrupulous, a self-serving framing that ignores decades of Bolsonaro's corruption and indecency. So that's how they kind of make this split, and they're now kind of three forces. None of them, though, seem to be as popular as Lula. All right, there's a little bit of update on the Brazilian election, a very, very interesting story. That's all the time we have for you today. We will be back on Friday.